So where on the planet have we met up with you? Where are you at?
In San Francisco.
And I just want to read here briefly some of what was provided to me. He'll be performing coming up in Fredericton on October 16th to 17th, Charlottetown, Moncton on the 19th, New Glasgow on the 20th and 21st, in Halifax at the Rebecca Cohn Auditorium. Your musical career, in a lot of ways, I was born pretty much the same time your first album came out. And throughout the 80s, obviously watching you on video and hearing your songs on the radio. And it's a real distinct pleasure and honor to meet you this way. And thank you very much for agreeing to speak.
Well, I appreciate having the opportunity. So good to talk with you.
So how does the day start for Bruce Cockburn? How does your morning get to this part of the day? I'm just kind of curious about that.
The alarm goes off at 6:15, and I get up and wake up my daughter and drive her to school. Well, she has breakfast while I make her lunch, and then we head off to school. After that, I do things like this.
When did the beard happen? Was that a pandemic project?
No, it sort of came at the tail end of it. I don't really have a theory for it or anything. It does seem like every 20 years or so I have a beard for a while, so it may be that.
I've been in broadcasting in Canadian radio for a long time, and you've had a tremendous amount of success over the years. And I wonder, was there ever a point that somebody said, your name might be problematic, and maybe you should go by Doug instead? It's a joke. I'm sorry.
I thought about it actually back in the day. One of my uncles changed the spelling of Cockburn, dropped the CK because his justification for that was that he was an MD and he wanted to make sure his patients could find him. But my dad always, who was also an MD, thought that was just an excuse, and he was just embarrassed. but so I don't know the truth of that one way or the other. But there's some confusion around it for sure. I mean, people hear the name Cockburn and they see how it's spelled, and they don't always make the connection that it's the same person. I remembered, when I was just getting rolling, really, that you frequently heard people on the radio referring to the songwriter named Bob Dylan, and I thought, it worked out okay for him, so it probably worked for me too.
The latest recording, "Oh Sun, Oh Moon," is this like number 35 of studio albums for you?
Studio albums, maybe. I don't really have a good count of that without actually trying to remember it all. I think it's officially album number 38, but some of those are compilations and live albums. So, right. Yeah, probably around there.
I heard you in another interview talking about, when Rocket Launcher came out and you started to gain traction in the United States, you actually were performing in Italy and Japan prior to that. And I see your tour schedule for next year has you overseas. You've got an ambitious, 25 different dates before Christmas? A very adventurous. Do you still describe yourself as a traveler at heart?
I would say so. Sure. I don't travel like I used to. My life is different than it was in the 70s when I really did a lot of traveling. But it's always been something I love. And I make a distinction sort of between regular travel and touring. Being on tour is, it's certainly traveling, but it's really about the shows and not about the terrain you're covering and all that. I mean, you don't always get to see much when you're on tour. But I've had the good fortune to be able to travel in other ways for other reasons at various points over the years, and that's always been pretty precious to me.
Are you still drawing inspiration from those journeys? Someone described you as a musical correspondent in some ways. I love that title.
Thanks. It was more. That was that. I would say that's the correspondent kind of thing was more of an 80s, 90s phenomenon than now. I guess if you wanted to be literal, you'd started in the mid 70s, kind of when I started sort of including topical content in the songs on a more regular basis than previously. So, and a lot of that topical comment came out of encounters with people in the course of traveling. Most of it did. So that was an accurate description for a while. I mean, nowadays I haven't done that sort of travel so much. I mean, we're still doing it. My daughter and I drove. She's 11, by the way, about to turn 12. We drove from San Francisco to Ontario this past summer, and I think she's got the bug as well. So, which is good. She'll actually be on tour with us for some of the shows in Atlantic Canada too. So,
has she been to this part of Canada yet?
Her very first tour, she was 2 months old, and yeah, she toured with us through the same region that we're covering now. A few different a few different towns, but similar.
And so many of the conversations I've read, transcripts of interviews and conversations I've heard, we're talking about music as a muse and how your work as a guitarist is amazing. And I was kind of surprised. I was thinking like of the Merle Travis picking kind of style, but you actually refer to that starting with inspiration from some of the blues players that you listen to. And I'm curious about that journey.
I'm not sure what the definition of Travis picking is, but I've always felt like it was a bit of a misnomer. I mean, I think that style of guitar preceded him, and so But in any case, I didn't. I don't think I've ever heard a Merle Travis record. I listened to a lot of country blues though, and was very much influenced by that as a guitar player, and in terms of performing and a certain kind of sensibility as well. Learned from watching the people that I got to see live in those, in the early days, like people, Brownie McGee and Sonny Terry, Mississippi John Hurt. These were John Lee Hooker. These were people that really had something special, and I was impressed by it, and I wanted to do something like that too. They weren't the only influences. I was also very much influenced by what was then called contemporary classical music, and by jazz, and by later on by music of other cultures around the world. But blues was a big one.
Where would you say a song fits within a society, and has that changed since your first songs that started to resonate with people?
Well, you can get pretty theoretical with this. Where everybody sings, every culture except the Taliban, so why do we as humans want to have music in our lives? And it has something to do with rhythm, but it also has something to do with the idea of singing per se. And so Inuit hunters had songs that they sang in the old days when they were out, like waiting for a seal to pop up out of the ice. I used to, at least, I don't know if I still do, have recordings of guys on a beach in Guadalcanal playing on a log and singing. And so, it's in the human species to make music. In the modern context, and a song touches people or it doesn't. I mean, it could be Miley Cyrus, or it could be Bob Dylan, or it could be Mario Lanza back in the day, or whatever. But we're all sort of touched in our own way by whatever it is that touches us. And I don't know. It's partly image in this era, because there's always a cultural component to it, of the people who were big admirers of Mario Lanza back in the 60s probably weren't big admirers of Bob Dylan, for instance. And it kind of went along with styles of dress and other ways of getting yourself through your day that any particular social group might have. So, this is not a good answer for your question. You were hoping for something more concise.
No. This is,
but it really comes down to this kind of organic thing. My songs, how they fit, I'm grateful for the fact that people listen to them and take me seriously. What they do for the individual who takes me seriously, I do not know. I mean, that's sort of, you probably get a different answer from everybody you ask.
your relationship with the songs, I assume, as time goes on, maybe the song doesn't change, but you change, society changes, people change. And I'm wondering about how that evolution, how that affects how you set, your song list for your upcoming tour, how that influences, obviously you have new material, new songs that speak to you in a different way because of where you're at in your life. What, you're 78 years young. Just wondering about that.
Um, yeah, well, there's a bunch of elements in there. When I'm putting a show together, I think obviously of the songs that I know everybody's going to want to hear, and I want to make sure that I include at least some of those in any given show. And then I want to do whatever's new that's interesting that I want to introduce to people, or just have fun playing because it is new, and it's more fun for me to play the new stuff most of the time. But then and then there's a selection of whatever fits in between those two categories that would be older songs that are not necessarily the ones that everybody asks for all the time, but that I feel like playing, or that seem to fit with the other content. So, I don't know. In the end, I try it out. I play a show like that, and if something doesn't feel like it works, then I put in something else. But that's that. For that, I need an audience reaction, and the audience reaction is more of a vibe than whether they clap or not, because most audiences are polite enough to clap regardless.
One of the things I heard from artists during the pandemic was to have that energy disrupted, to be in a room by yourself talking to your camera or performing to, the unblinking eye of the laptop. It's a whole lot different than having that exchange of idea and information.
Absolutely. What you're describing is boring as all get out. I can sit and play my songs for myself. It feels, on the occasions where I've had to record myself, on the iPad or whatever, which is what I have. I don't really have a laptop that I can work with, but on those occasions, it's, you do it because you have to, because there's something needs to get done, and that's the way to do it. But there's no feel. I mean, I try to inject a feel into it as I would if I were playing it without the camera being there. I mean, when I sing my songs to myself, I try to feel into them, because otherwise it's just an exercise. But it's awkward, I find, with the camera and having to deal. If somebody else was operating it, it would be less awkward. And I have a friend named Mark Yahiro that I've done a bunch of that kind of recording with, where he'll make sure it gets recorded properly and that there's a video that works, etc. And all I got to do is sing the song, and that works much better. And then there's also then another person in the room with you that you can kind of play to. And but I think radio people, for instance, get used to putting their voice out there in the expectation that there is an audience out there somewhere. Like for years and years. I mean, I grew up listening to what was rock and roll radio, and those DJs get on there and blather on about whatever and make fools of themselves, but they're entertaining, and they were entertaining an audience that they never get to see, which I would find difficult. And I have, it's kind of a talent that people in that world have that I'm not sure I do.
I heard you commenting on the internet and social media, and I remember the times before social media started to really take off, people were talking about the democratization of everything from information to citizen journalism. But it seems as though the extreme edges have been pushed even further to the extreme through these platforms. And you talk about this left and right and the fantasy that exists. And now, as someone who's living in the United States, I'm sure you view things through a different lens. Do you follow Canadian politics? Is that an interest of yours in any way, given where you're at in your life and with your young family?
Up to a point, I do. I mean, I don't. I wouldn't say I'm deeply knowledgeable at this point, but I pay attention. My news feed includes the CBC, and I'm in Canada enough that I hear how people talk about things too, so I have a general idea what's going on.
Do you find that audiences are different? I mean, again, I mentioned you're off to Italy, you're off to other parts of the world, places in the world. Are the audiences different in those different places you visit?
In a minor sort of way, yes. Superficially, I guess is the better word. Um, there's Italian audiences, in my experience, tend to be quite volatile. If they don't like you, you find out right away.
Right.
And when they do like you, they're very warm and effusive, and you know that right away too. Other audiences are a little cooler and calmer and less interactive. But at this point, I think that, and I'm not sure if it's a positive thing or not, but I think it has also to do with the internet, that people are used to getting the same stuff wherever you go in the world now. Just as it's, you used to notice different styles of dress from country to country, but you don't now. And the same thing applies to music and people's reaction to it. Um, there are, like I say, superficial differences, but I think I suppose it's been a while since I've been in Italy, so maybe you have to ask me this again after it. I'll see if I still have the same answer. But I would expect that audiences there are going to be pretty similar to how they are elsewhere.
Again, leveling the playing field in some ways. I spoke with a manager a few weeks ago who said with streaming, things have changed a lot for emerging artists. Now, you've been in the industry for 50 years, and I'm sure it's changed dramatically over that time, that you could write another book about that. But here we have this idea, though, someone might have 500,000 streams, but they're in a playlist. People don't even know who they are. They couldn't sell at a 75-seat room. And you're on this very ambitious tour of Atlantic Canada and then beyond, coming up over the next bit. What do you have to do to get prepared for that after this intense style of guitar playing that you have, and obviously that time is moving along and we're all getting older?
I practice, and yeah, there's wear and tear on the body that definitely can't be ignored. But so far, I'm able to get away with it, and I'm happy about that.
We talk, or you talk often about, and it is brought up often about your spirituality, your connection with the divine, and how that's changed over the years. So maybe it's like the beard; it comes and goes depending on where you're at. Not to in any way question your spirituality, but does it? Do you mind talking about that? Is that something that you?
No. I'm willing to talk about it to anybody that's willing to listen.
So what is God? What is religion? If we want to look big picture, what does it mean to you?
Well, what is God and what it means to me are kind of different things. I don't have an answer for the first one. um, I think there is a God. I think that what we mean by that word, and by the sense of that I've had and other people have uh, of having experienced the presence that we call God. Uh, I that that's that, right. But and the rest of spirituality for me is trying to understand what that is, and trying to figure out what my relationship with it is supposed to be, and what I can get it to be. So I think I deal with these things in Christian terms, because that's been my life. That's drawn me that way. I don't think that's the only way to approach it, but it's the way that works for me, and for a number of other people that I'm acquainted with. Um, but what is? I think the important thing is to recognize that there is a spiritual reality, and that it matters. That there's. I think that all of us hunger for a sense of our place in the cosmos. Uh, we mask that hunger with things like the internet and movies and books and sports and whatever other kinds of outward things we engage in. But if you take all that away, there's a soul in there crying out for connection with the big picture. And for me, that means having a relationship with God. And so that's what I try to do. I try to do is even sort of a weird way to say it. I try to keep myself out of the way so that relationship can happen.
I heard you describing that, love thy neighbor, but it should be unconditional. And so much about our society today is not only do we disagree, but we disagree so much that we can't even like each other.
Well, or even talk to each other in a respectful manner without liking each other. I mean, it's difficult. The degree to which we're sort of fractionalized and fragmented as a culture, I think it's happening worldwide. I know it's happening in North America, and particularly in the U.S. And I deplore it. I think it's. We used to talk about the me generation, and we're so far beyond that now that there's not even the term doesn't even mean anything anymore, because everybody's just like in their little relationship with the screen. I mean, everybody's, take that with a grain of salt. There's obviously exceptions to this, and a lot of people who are concerned about it besides me, but and who are trying to offset it. But it's there. Recent political maneuverings in the U.S. have aggravated that. But it goes beyond the political maneuverings. It almost seems to me as if the way that the politics works now is just being pushed and prodded by some nefarious entity that wants to see us all come apart. And something feeds off all this discord, and I think we have to resist that.
He's coming to the Maritimes, Fredericton, Charlottetown, Moncton, New Glasgow, and Halifax. And I love that the show started at 7:30. I think that's a good thing, to get out and get your entertainment early in the evening. And I'm wondering, what does Bruce Cockburn want people to take away from the end of the show? What are you hoping they go home with?
Well, I hope they feel like they got their money's worth, for one thing, and that they've been touched. I mean, what happens in a show for me, and I think, I might be projecting here, but I think it works for everybody that's there. When things go right, is that we all come away with the sense of having shared an experience, and the songs are a vehicle for that. And it's that shared experience that makes it rewarding and precious for everybody. So that's what I hope for.
You've been very generous with your time, and thank you for all the great music over the years. I really do appreciate that as a fan and as a journalist to be able to have a few moments of your day. It's really good for me. So I do want to thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your interest, and it's been enjoyable talking with you.